the topic that we're going to be discussing today it comes to everybody's mind, is disclosure. Now, it's not like in the movies that disclosure happens like one fine day dropping a bombshell, but it's an ongoing process that starts from the day when the child comes home. And I remember you telling us when we came to you for counseling, way before we even set out to adopt, that a lot of people struggle even today with this. How does one make this disclosure a continuous journey? And say the appropriate things at the appropriate age that the child can assimilate. You know, that's very important.
Too many questions. Yeah. Okay. Disclosure is imperative. And I don't think I'd like to call it disclosure. I think it's part of our parenting process. And you have a right to, the child has a right to know, and we have a duty to tell the child, without a doubt. Now, why are we Indian parents sometimes reluctant to tell a child that he or she is adopted? I think it stems a lot from our socio-cultural background, where in our country, the minute a couple is married, they say, when is the baby coming? And then 1 year has passed, 2 years has passed, and they will say, no baby, what happened? Or something like that. And it is almost imperative that a woman has to prove herself by having a baby. And then you come one day and you tell the whole world, this is my baby, we've adopted her. And of course they look at you like that and say, ha ha, so you couldn't have one. So in our minds, it's very often, what shall I say? It's almost like you have failed in being a good Indian wife or a good mother, and you haven't had a child. Now you're telling everybody, I didn't have a child, so I adopted. And many women tend not to want, many couples tend not to want to disclose to the world at large also, and to the child that the child is adopted, because in their own minds, it means there's a sense of failure. In our own minds, in the minds of our families, adoption is second-class parenting. It's not what we really have set out to do. And until we have a value in our own minds that biology and adoption are absolutely equal, we give both the same value, disclosure will be relatively more difficult. And disclosure is not something that happens bang like in the movies. It's something that starts as soon as a child looks at you. And you say, you know, when we brought you home, when we adopted you, the child may not quite understand what we're talking about, but sooner or later it clicks, haha, this is what my parents were talking about. And that's about the time when they understand something about reproduction. And it's an ongoing process of questions, of answers, of little chats, you know, and it's ongoing. I don't think it's something that happens suddenly one day.
So coming to you, Sheila, so why do you think it's important that we have this conversation right from the start, and you know, and have a continuous kind of a journey with our child? I mean, why is disclosure so important to the child?
Let me make a couple of
and also, how do we broach this topic?
Okay. Let me answer those 2 or 3 questions with a couple of points I'd like to make in the area. First, we often get this question from parents at the Department of Child Psychiatry, you know, how do you break the news? How do you do it? As already mentioned, this is not about breaking the news, because breaking the news is often ridden with a sense of trepidation. And that's a reflection of how we as parents view adoption. That means the fear is in our mind, not in the child's mind. So the first thing is, how do you make the paradigm shift from breaking the news to celebrating the truth, for instance, or celebrating the family that we are. And this is one of our family truths, that this is one of our happy family truths. That's one. 2, as already mentioned, it is a process. So between saying, you know, how old should a child be? When do you start disclosure? So between, you know, 1 year or 1.5 or 2, which clearly is very young, and 13 to 16, which is too old, what's the right age? Of course, depending on a child's cognitive abilities and developmental abilities, roughly, on an average, for for a neurotypical, or let's say a quote-unquote normal child, the processes of disclosure could begin as early as about 3 or 3.5, when children start to be more communicative and there's a great deal of curiosity and they're asking questions about things. Now that doesn't mean that they're going to be asking questions about adoption. Perhaps not. But children love stories, and that's a great place to start. So what you're doing at age 3 and 4 is you're laying the ground for your adoption disclosure, so to speak. What is the content at that age? Families. What are families about? Who are they made up of? You know, you're getting to a child's notion of a family as loving, caring, helpful, nurturing, a bunch of other things, all that makes up a family. And then when a child is about 5 to 6, then you're moving on to, you know, more information at that stage about children who don't have families, families that don't have children, that want children. And that's how you're sort of gradually making inroads into the issue in a way that's appropriate to a child's age and development. Coming to your last question, which was why disclosure and why start early? There are a couple of different reasons for this. The first is a more obvious one, because if your child doesn't hear it from you, your child is going to hear it somewhere and from someone else, and in ways that may not be as positive as you would like. You know, people have very different ways. You know, heard it at school. Oh, I know where you're from. Your mommy picked you out of a dustbin. Very common, right? Or you hear a neighbor say, you know, in a moment of upset or anger, or a distant family relative, oh yeah, you're adopted. That's why. So, you know, so before other people have a chance to color the perception of a child and on the notion of adoption, and, you know, they already get into this whole thing of you don't belong, because that's the message. Parents need to get their foot in first and have their say first, so to speak. The other issue is children right from the age of 1, 2, 3 develop notions of family, like I said, about what a family is. They develop, they're already developing narratives of this family, my family, who we are, stories about this family. So if you do not disclose, if adoption isn't one of many narratives that emerges in a child's mind, and you know, child knows nothing, and then at age 13, you suddenly decide you're going to disclose and tell this child that, okay, here's the story and you're adopted, or even at age 9, for that matter, which is quite old, it's hard from a child's perspective. It means that a child essentially has to wipe his or her slate clean. You mean that everything else that I thought this family was and believed about this family is not true? You mean I have to start over again? That's where a child is coming from, and that's really difficult. As children get older, it gets harder and harder for them to accommodate new narratives and notions that they have not been privy to right at the start.
So, you know, sometimes we do hear of instances when children do, you know, start questioning at the age of 2 or 2.5. They see a pregnant aunt in the house, and then and then shift the question to you. So did I come from your tummy as well, right? So it's not really at 3.5. So there is no, you can't peg an age to it, right? So how do you then how do you prepare this? So do you start at 6 months, 8 months? Is it through storytelling? How do you prepare?
I'll tell you what Aloma said about this once. So let me speak for Aloma. So this is what she said when she came to visit us one day. You know, at age 2, 3, even 5, 6, when children ask some of these questions, the basis is purely one of curiosity. Did I come from your tummy? Or where did I come from? they're not asking for a long story, and isn't that what you said?
That's true.
You know, they're not asking for a long story. Did I come from your tummy? No, you did not. And they may just run off, and that's all they need. So another issue to disclosure, I'm glad you raised this, is how much do children want to know? At that point, they may not be asking for, deep stories, etc. They're not interested. They're only 3. The answer they're looking for is no. I don't know if Aloma wants to. Please do.
Actually, that story really comes from a personal one when my 3-year-old daughter came and said to me, Mama, these boys are talking such rubbish. So I said, what are they saying? And she said, they're saying they came from your tummy. So she said, did they come from your tummy? So I said, yes. Oh, yuck, she said. and then she ran away and she came back and she said, did I come from your tummy? So I said, no. Thank God, she said.
That's all true.
But she did come back 2 weeks later and said, then from whose tummy did I come from? I said, from someone else's tummy. That was it for the time being.
Yeah.
What she said was actually right.